All right, good morning or good afternoon, depending
And
on where
Happy New
you
Year.
are. And Happy New Year. Yeah, this is Curt Barone,
And Brad Pinsky.
and we're here for our annual roundup of cases from 2023. And yep, we got that all set. What we hope to do is kind of look at cases from a couple of different perspectives that have happened over 2023, just sort of summarize, and then we're ready for 2024. So, Brad, what do you got? I asked you to kind of come up with some categories here. So, what do you got?
Yeah, and I tried to pick a theme of unusual stuff that happened in 23. I didn't want to pick any of the harassment cases, discrimination cases, because there's nothing new, right? As your database says, those cases are 70 some odd percent of our cases. So I wanted to find some new stuff. So I went back to 23, pulled the things that I thought were interesting, and I wanted to start in Louisiana, where I haven't seen the result of some of these, but where firefighters claimed that them being fingerprinted as a term or condition of their employment had no rational basis and was an unreasonable search and seizure in violation of the Fourth Amendment. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of employers do this. And in fact, in New York State, a lot of employers do this where I am. And New York, like I'm assuming many other states, has a law that prohibits the collection of biometric indicators, your fingerprints, and as a condition of employment. So think of it. There are so many employers who use a fingerprint clock in, check in, and they don't have the right under many state laws to do that. So here we have a new twist where the firefighters are saying, you're collecting our fingerprints, right? You're storing them, and that's an unreasonable search and seizure. Now, I haven't seen the result of this, but I happen to agree. I think it is an unreasonable search and seizure. So I'd love to see what happens. But that was one of the cases I got.
Hmm.
Um, then I want to highlight a trend, and obviously we're not going to go through and discuss all these, right? We're just highlighting it. But then I want to go through a trend which I think started a couple of years ago, going to Kansas City, Missouri, where we had a firefighter plead guilty to manslaughter. He was the operator of a engine, ran a red light, ends up killing a few people. But this to me is a continuation of a trend that is only recent in the last number of years, at least in my impression, where we're seeing the DAs go after the firefighters. And, I want to go back. This is going to be interesting, but I want to go back to Lairdsville, Oneida County, New York. And in Lairdsville in 01 or 02, where a fire chief, Alan Baird, was convicted of criminally negligent homicide for a live fire training death. Now, everyone's saying, well, why is that relevant? Because what happened at that point is New York State did a video, and it was a very interesting video because, where the deputy chief was convicted of, these deaths in something that wasn't, it's the fire service. We don't get convicted of anything. And back then, the reaction was so bad, right? Was so bad. Like, how can we go after a fire chief for this? And I'm not saying we should or shouldn't have, right? I have very different feelings on that case, but now we're starting to see that trend where we are going after people, firefighters for things that happen. And we're no longer just saying, oh, well, he had to drive fast to the scene. It was an important scene. So what if he killed a few people? We're not saying that anymore. We're putting some really strict burdens, some obligations on firefighters and operators to drive in a reasonable manner consistent with weather and traffic conditions and all these, and consistent with the emergency, et cetera. And they're, the law's going after them when they exceed what is reasonable. And what I think is interesting is we're seeing an impact between we're the fire service and we're citizens with rights not to be killed at an intersection. So I found that interesting. This trend's going to continue, but it's an important trend for everyone to think about. And it's not new, but it's becoming a lot more common.
Yeah, and I actually did a class a while back on firefighters charged with manslaughter and other homicide-related offenses. And there was a case out of Washington, which was the first one that got my attention, where an incident commander was charged with manslaughter for some firefighters at a wildland fire, where the fire blew up the side of a hill and killed the firefighters. And he was charged, and he ultimately pled guilty to some lesser offenses. But what was interesting there was that it took 5 years from the date of the fire to the filing of the charge, a little over 5 years.
Wow.
And here's the most interesting thing. the family of the deceased, the families of the deceased firefighters, with one family in particular, but it was the families of the deceased firefighters, that they weren't suing civilly. This was not a money issue. They were lobbying the prosecutors. They first lobbied the state prosecutors, then they lobbied federal prosecutors, then they lobbied the U.S. attorney and Congress, because they wanted justice. And eventually they were successful in lobbying for criminal charges. And I think that that is, we can talk about the way society's going, but when you have these, whether it's individuals or groups that are lobbying for criminal sanctions, and we see it a lot in law enforcement, and unfortunately, it seems to be extending to firefighters as well. But we've got a number of cases. That's interesting. I agree.
So now I want to juxtapose that, right? Since we have that new trend to an old trend, just to show some things never change. Not many years ago, a number of years ago, I did a lecture out at the National Safety Officers Conference in Arizona. And I was talking about driver and apparatus safety. And one of the things I talked about back then, and this is probably, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, maybe. One of the things I talked about back then is, why are people still being killed or injured by hoses falling off trucks? There is an NFPA on that, right? And you've got to design the truck with a hose bed cover. How can this possibly happen? And I pulled out a whole bunch of articles that said freak accident, women killed by, hose, freak accident. And there's like 20 freak accidents. Well, here we go. We had 2 in 23 that we covered, right? One in Nashville, one in Dallas, where people were struck by hose falling off the truck. How is this still happening? This should not happen. Things that can be prevented in advance of an emergency should never happen. And cover your hose. All right. If you're taking it off, I know people don't like it. It slows down our hose deployment. Oh, come on. Right. I mean, it's 2 clicks or a pull of a latch. Right. That's crazy. But yet, constantly, and now twice in 23, we've got 2 suits where people are being severely hurt or killed over falling hose. So juxtaposed to, we're seeing the law change with regard to going after drivers of emergency vehicles. Now we're just continuing to see more lawsuits of preventable things, right? And so that, to me, I thought 2 of them, and we're going to have 2 more in 24 and 2 more in 25. Cover your damn hoses. Yeah. Okay. So as I get to the end, I got 2 more to go, 3 more to go that I thought were interesting. And one is, and I'm really thankful, I wish they did this about 20 years ago, but the IAFF suing the NFPA over the PFAS in the PPE. Now, I haven't seen what's happened to this, but all I know is, as we all know, right, firefighters have such an increased risk in cancer of the stuff that we're fighting, but my God, the stuff that we're wearing. So if there's one case to me that is the most important issue in 23, it's this lawsuit. And if we are truly wearing, because the NFPA specifies it in their requirements, which the IAFF points out, if we are truly wearing PFAS, and if that PFAS is truly causing us cancer, this is going to change. I mean, every turnout gear could be, company could be sued, NFPA, who, you have relations or had relations with,
I'm conflicted on this one because as a former member of the IAFF and a supporter of the IAFF, I have that going. And then as a former employee and a member of the NFPA, I've got that going. And I just think it's unfortunate because the NFPA values the IAFF. This goes back 30 plus years that there's been a close relationship. And I think it's unfortunate that this couldn't have been worked out. I think it could have been and should have been worked out. I'm not sure where where they came to loggerheads about it. But this should have been worked out, and this should have been addressed. So, unfortunately, it resulted in a lawsuit. And I understand the IAFF I don't know if you saw the recent headlines, but they've been lobbying the state attorney general in Massachusetts to look at criminal, or at least maybe not criminal. That's not. It wasn't criminal. I think that they were asking the attorney general to file suit against either the NFPA or the equipment manufacturers for whether it's deceptive trade practices or something of that nature, some sort of commercial type of involvement of the Attorney General in it. So we'll see where that goes. Again, I think it's unfortunate. We're all in this together. We should be working cooperatively together, but I guess at some point you just can't work it out.
And I wonder, we won't rehash this whole thing, but I really wonder, when did we learn that PFAS was bad? I mean, this is not this year, and
yeah, I don't think we knew that it was, first of all, I had no idea that it was present in AFFF. In fact, when we first issued, I was on the job when we first issued AFFF, and we were told that it's really nothing more than soap. It's really soap. Don't worry.
And it smells like bubbly, clean soap. I mean, it just smells like soap.
After the foam is past a certain age in Providence anyway, it was considered surplus, so you could use it for training, but we'd also use it to clean the floors and different things. And again, totally oblivious. Like, we were not taught or not informed. So this was back in the late 70s, early 80s. That this was going on. So that's part of it. And then, how it came to be in the turnout gear, how that became almost a requirement, baffles me. There's a committee that is supposed to be looking out for firefighter health and safety that somehow I can't imagine. I know the people that are on that committee. They're top-notch people. They could not have been aware of this. So, a lot of questions. And again, I think my goal in life is to try to avoid people getting involved in litigation, not trying to resolve problems through litigation. But it's really unfortunate that this couldn't have been worked out in a different way.
It is. And I hope it doesn't tarnish the reputation too much of the NFPA. Because they're there for our safety, as firefighter safety and safety of all. And here you go. They actually went the opposite way, maybe unknowingly, right, to put things into our gear. Anyway, so I thought that was clearly monumental in 23. Yeah. And the last two I have are connected, but not. So I'll give you the headlines. But one is where Miami-Dade was investigating that somebody put a hidden camera in a firehouse bathroom. Right. And now the other one was, and you'll see why I'm kind of comparing them, was in Indiana, where there was allegations into exam cheating. Now, let me jump to the exam cheating. One's intentional, one's unintentional, or was it? So the exam cheating was kind of, people asking questions or talking during the exam, or right. That's not what it is here. What is here is preparation. They copied or remembered the questions. They wrote down the questions. They shared the questions that were being asked, which is such a common practice now, right? I mean, we have books. Look, everyone knows if you've taken the National Boarded Fire Officer 1 or Firefighter 1, you get exam books.
We just lost your volume, Brad. Oh. No volume. Your camera froze a second ago too.
How about now?
You're good.
I'm good. Okay. You're good. Well, unfortunately I'm at home, don't have my whole setup that I have at work. Okay. Anyway, so here they're collecting information, they're collecting exam questions, and that becomes a cheating scheme. Oh, we're creating our own book. But yet, when you take any national exam, any state exam, you have a test bank of questions and they're almost identical. So I thought this was interesting that, because it could there were apologies and we didn't mean it, and I don't think these people understood what they're doing, that type of thing, and we don't think it's improper. I don't care whether it's improper or not, right? I don't think it's improper. Once you take a test, right, it is fair game, as far as I'm concerned, to write it down, to share it, to tell people what was on it. We're not sworn to privacy and secrecy, but it was an unintentional method to say we should be held to a higher standard, right? I think that's the allegation, that firefighters should be held to a higher standard. Juxtapose that back again to the hidden camera in the bathroom, which I thought was interesting because you just don't know what type of person's in every job. And in the fire service, we know we have arsonists, we know we have pedophiles, we have all types of people. And here we have another creepy person, whoever it was, putting a camera in the firehouse. Now, that is nothing new. We probably see a couple of those a year, camera in the bathroom, in the firehouse, right? But it's just the idea of cheating versus it's an okay practice, right? No, obviously you don't put cameras, in the bathroom or anywhere else inappropriate. But on the cheating thing, It was just the way things were. So I don't know. I found those all interesting. I will end my comments. You have a really interesting list, I think, is an interesting listener review. But I'll end my comments with, there wasn't anything shocking in 23, except for the PFAS thing was completely shocking. But we're seeing trends, and the trends are growing and expanding of things were happening. Theft is still on the rise, right? In the firehouses and the unions and the whatever. We're still seeing that. We're seeing a lot more criminally negligent homicide cases with drivers. We're seeing a lot more attacks. We're seeing a lot more, and I didn't cover this, but clearly a trend, and you're going to be speaking on it, I think, at my conference, is, firefighters and EMTs helping out the police and getting in trouble, ketamine, things like that. That's a trend. So I would say 23 was more the year of expanding trends.
Interesting. Yeah, normally I do kind of what you just did and pick the highlights, pick the most important things. And I started looking at all of the cases that we had. There's somewhere around almost 300 cases that we covered in 2023. And that's probably out of somewhere around that I've been able to document somewhere around 1,000 cases. I can't cover them all. Yeah, but they go in the database. So, but what I'd like to do, let me get my screen share going, because I want to share the list so folks can kind of at least follow the list that we're going with here. So let me kind of swing this over here, and I got to kind of scrunch it down. Whoops. There we go. Okay, so we're going to start. Let's start with the largest lawsuits filed. These are the six largest lawsuits filed. And the first one is a Wildland fire, but these are in my database. These are like the biggest cases. Actually, I didn't include all the ones in the database, just the ones that we covered in the blog, which the big ones I typically will cover. But we had two California fire departments or fire agencies, CAL FIRE included, and I believe the other one was the U.S. Forest Service, but they were seeking over $120 million in damages for two major wildland fires. That's the biggest lawsuit that we saw filed. Okay, the next biggest one is in Flint. They had I don't recall if it was one or two deaths. I think if I click on it, we might even actually be able to see the case. Yeah, let me kind of swing that in here. We had, two young boys who died, and the firefighters completed a primary search and didn't find the bodies. And I guess they were found on the secondary search. And the parents are upset. And anybody who's found bodies in a fire understands that it's very difficult to discern a body from the surroundings. And I can't fault people for missing somebody on a primary. It's just, if we're going to be held to that standard, boy, that's tough. But anyway, that's the next largest lawsuit. Next one was filed by an Oregon fire chief who is suing for $20 million for over his termination. Another case out of Oregon, must be a big, a big money. Issue here in lawsuits in Oregon, but volunteer firefighter who, remember, we covered this one a few weeks ago. This was a female firefighter alleging sexual harassment who had filed an $8.35 million lawsuit a couple of years ago. That case was voluntarily dismissed and then refiled again. So we're not totally sure what's going on there, but that case was refiled. NYPD and FDNY sued for $7 million over a shooting death and the care that was given to the victim afterwards. And then we got this recent one, $4.5 million lawsuit by a person who was upset that an Ohio fire chief administered Narcan to him while they were apparently conscious and awake. I find that a little bit hard, and you and I talked about this recently. I find it a little hard to believe that somebody, particularly somebody who fell asleep standing up and admits to falling asleep standing up was not somehow impaired. But who knows? At the end of the day, who knows? It'll be up to the court. The next category is the largest verdicts. Okay.
Yeah, these are a big deal.
Yeah. But I want to, you talk about juxtaposing, take a look at the demands. Okay. and then
Yeah.
take a look at the reality. Now, again, these are different years. Obviously, these cases that you see under the largest verdicts were probably filed 5 or 6 or 10 years ago. Okay. But sometimes the demands, obviously, you just look at the dollar amounts and the demands, not quite what we're seeing here with regard to what the verdicts are going to be. So, $5 million award to a California firefighter who felt he was wrongfully terminated. The jury agreed.
And most of that one was past and future earnings, right? Lost
Yeah.
earnings in the past, lost earnings in the future. And I do want people to understand that when you deal with earnings, that's the number one thing plaintiffs' lawyers are looking for. Plaintiffs' lawyers don't care about injuries as much as they do about what were your lost earnings, because future lost earnings is big money. And that's the example of it.
It is. And you know, when you fire someone who's in their 20s or 30s, the damages are going to be different than if they're in their 60s and 70s.
Right.
You know, next one here, California jury awards a fired fire chief 4.1 million. That's not the same one from the lawsuit that was filed up above here, but or I guess it was an Oregon chief anyway. But you can see that 4.1 million for wrongful termination there in California. This New Jersey case is really
Yeah, I remember
kind
that.
of a strange one, but it involved there's actually several suits, but it goes back 20 or 30 years. And there was apparently some child abuse by a firefighter that the department should have taken some steps to prevent it from happening. The department didn't. New York has this unusual law, New Jersey, I guess, too. They
Both now, yeah.
were able to go back and recover the damages for this. So again, not a huge award, 331,000, but certainly one of the bigger ones, really. And when you think about it, that's one of the bigger ones that we saw in terms of jury awards here. Next one, recently we covered this one in November. A Houston firefighter recovered $250,000 over a video that somehow got off of her computer. I believe it was on her computer, and then magically
To the chief and the captain.
it somehow got off of her computer and onto somebody else's computer. And at any rate, $250,000 damage award there. And then the fifth one, $100,000 in a disability discrimination case. I believe this is that suicide case that we talked about, where a female firefighter committed, or female medic committed suicide. And they didn't go after the department for wrongful death, which we do see occasionally, but they did go after the Department for Disability Discrimination, and the jury awarded $100,000. So,
and I just want to comment on that for a second, because I think, look, we've seen Nicole Mittendorf bullying suicide, right? We've seen these. This is
Illinois as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a rare instance, but I just, if there's any message we could deliver to the fire services, look out for your own, stop beating up your own, right? Look out for your members, your employees, your community. But man, I get why bullying and hazing happens. I'm not excusing it, but I understand the science of it, to indoctrinate you into the group and all that, but to push somebody to the point of suicide, my God.
Yeah.
And it's not a trend, it's a constant.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
It's an interesting case.
Yeah.
Okay, next one here is the big settlement of 2023. And it has to do with the Kobe Bryant helicopter crash and the photos that were taken both by LA County sheriffs and firefighters. The settlement was $28.5 million. I believe the jury award was actually there was a jury.
That was 40 or 49, something like that.
Yeah, it was higher, but they ended up settling for 28.5 million. But the total, there was I think 4 different plaintiffs' lawsuits from victims' families that sued.
Right, all the passengers.
Right, and then there were some lawsuits filed by firefighters who were disciplined over what happened. So somewhere 5 or 6 different lawsuits. Total damages somewhere close to $40 million, $38 million total when you look at it all over pictures. over picture taking, you know. So you know, these things have serious
Oh
consequences,
yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
we tend to be very complacent about it, and you know, we don't have to drive ourselves crazy with it, but we've got to take reasonable precautions. And Jesus, just the it's not good for the taxpayers, it's not good for the firefighters, it's not good for the victims. So, um, next one here, there was a Firehouse child abuse case early in January, 3.25 million dollars. Let me get that one up here. And yeah, this was the one in New York. And it goes back to the 70s. So we had a couple there that are
By the
kind
way,
of,
I'm defending about 10 of these
yeah.
throughout New York State.
Why don't you explain why? Why are you defending now cases that go back years and years?
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something that's been overlooked, which I'm really shocked about. But in any event, because I think I'm going to win it, I wouldn't have settled it. But so what happened here is Cuomo, when he was Governor Cuomo, when he was in office before he was ousted, passed a series of laws that reactivated or restarted the statutes of limitation up till September of 22, I think. He gave everyone another year or two to go back, and he said if you were a child and your time to sue expired against anybody. This has nothing to do with the fire service, but then we're going to allow you to sue again. So all these suits started against the Boy Scouts. Now I think my number is somewhere around 9, 10, 11 that I'm defending throughout the state. And they're all on hold because the Boy Scouts are on hold. So the ones I'm defending are where they sue the Boy Scouts and the fire company for having a, like an Explorer type program, a junior fire program. And there was allegedly a pedophile who was hired by the Boy Scouts and maybe housed where they had the overnight stays or something at the firehouse. But, everybody's involved. So they extended the statute, and you saw thousands of these cases, and I have a bunch of them. The interesting thing, and they've all been sitting there for years. I filed motions to dismiss and answers, and they're just held because the Boy Scouts are filed bankruptcy, and so the whole case stays. But that's coming to an end shortly, I think. And the interesting thing about this, which I don't know why nobody's picked this up, because I have a bunch of motions ready to go in. The cases allowed, right? The cases were the law allows the individual to sue the pedophile, the alleged pedophile, not a respondent superior, not the person who hired them. So my interpretation of the law, and thankfully the commentaries in the statute, I don't know how to explain that to people. When the printers publish the statutes in a book, a lot of times they're commenters, right? And they write, no, you should look at this, or here's a case, or kind of like we do, but they put it in writing in the statutes. In any event, one of the commenters even now have said, picking up, I don't know who came first, me or them, but picking up the argument that you can't sue the person who hired the alleged pedophile, you can only sue the pedophile. And by the way, most of which who are dead. In most of my cases, they're all dead. These happened in the 60s. And how do you defend this, right? It's an incredible thing that they did, but the fire service got really whacked. It hasn't cost any money yet because all these cases have been held up. There's one New Jersey that settles, or New York that settles, but I wouldn't, because I believe you can't sue the person who hired or contracted or selected them. You can only sue the pedophile. In any event, that's my argument. The commentaries actually in statute agree. They may or may not have paid too much money. Maybe zero was too much. Who knows? But these cases, you're going to start seeing these cases in 24. I believe the bankruptcy will be over by the Boy Scouts in 24. I'm not totally on top of that. I'm not part of those discussions. But once that happens, the dam's going to break, and all these cases are either going to settle or they're all going to go forward. And we don't know if it's a global settlement, I should say, right? Is it a global settlement where, okay, well, all the Boy Scouts are settled, but not as against everyone who worked with the Boy Scouts, the fire companies. But these are huge. And this is a trend of the state. I think California did this. I wasn't sure if Colorado, but New York and New Jersey are not the only states who've revitalized these child victimization acts.
So like a lot of things in society today, people have the best of intentions when they enact these things, but they haven't fully thought through the consequences of it. And it just, I mean, just think about people's recollections from 30 or 40 years
They're
ago.
not even around. I can't find a witness.
It's
who's
just,
the witness?
they put you in an impossible situation. So
I look at it like reparations, and I don't want to get off on that political tangent, but it's almost the same thing. If you made a claim, legitimate or otherwise, right, we're going to give you money by basically saying we're going to allow you to have a lawsuit that nobody could defend because there's no witnesses who knew it happened, and the person who did it's dead. How are we supposed to defend that?
Yeah.
But, okay.
Well, next one here is a settlement of a retaliation suit brought by a California division chief, 2.6 million. Next one, again, 2.6 million. This is an interesting one. If you recall, we had a captain in LA County that was shot and wounded. He was, I believe, paralyzed. Another firefighter was killed in the same incident, and they were shot by a firefighter, a disgruntled firefighter who, I believe, he went home. He set his house on fire and ended up committing suicide afterwards. But, you know, it was obviously someone with some mental issues. And the county, and I think this is tough because a lot of fire departments find themselves in this situation where firefighter A is accusing firefighter B of being difficult or threatening or a liability or whatever it may be, and now the department is trying to deal with it. How do we deal? You know, we're limited in terms of what we can do. Do we do everything we could do? Did we not do everything we could do?
Right.
And that was the allegations. Anyway, that the department didn't do enough to recognize and deal with this particular employee. And, you know, the settlement here, 2.6 million. So
they must have thought there's a fair chance of losing, because I'm surprised that they would settle this. Obviously we don't always know all the facts when we see it,
right.
but you know, something that just because you're an employee somewhere, but you do something against a co-employee, right? But out of the building doesn't mean we should necessarily be liable for it. You know, what's the basis of liability? And I thought this was really a stretch, but obviously those who are defending it thought they had a fair chance of losing. So
yeah,
what do I know?
There's certain common factors with regard to workplace shootings. When you have somebody that's disgruntled comes back into the workplace and starts shooting, the recent case, and it's very common, ends up in a suicide, you know, at the end of it. The shooting up in Maine, it wasn't necessarily in a workplace, but a guy went to a couple of bars and there was some domestic issues that were circling in the background. But again, did the people who had an opportunity to deal with this particular person and protect society from them, did they do what they could do? Did they not? Would it have been a stretch? Was it predictable? Was it not? Very, very difficult area here. Right. And no easy answers, because when you come down too hard on somebody who hasn't done something wrong, but all they've done is maybe said some things, you know, is that
got an ADA issue, right? You go after somebody for a perceived disability, perceived mental impairment, you know, depression and whatever, and what are you going to do? Look, I think what you do, you have a suspicion, you send him to a therapist, now you're off the hook, right? And get him or her evaluated, and now we're all set. But
we're not very good. I'll tell you, we're not very good. Therapists are not very good at predicting violent tendencies. And I believe state of the art right now is you cannot predict beyond 30 days. You can make fairly good predictions, like better than flipping a coin, but not much better at up to 30 days. But we're not very good at going beyond 30 days.
But then how are we supposed to? How's the fire surfer supposed to know? We're not professionals.
That's
we put
the thing.
Fires.
And again, a lot of the things we're going to talk about here is people's expectations being up here, and our ability is down here. You know, it's like we talked about the primary search thing, and people expect that if you do a primary search, you're going to definitely find a victim and be able to save them, and that's just not realistic. Anybody who's done a search realizes that, you know. But next one here, Seattle. There was a wrongful death suit, and they ended up settling that one for 1.8 million. And then the only FLSA settlement that really reached the threshold here to be in here was the Tulsa settlement. We see a lot of FLSA lawsuits, and a lot of times we don't know the dollar amount because it still has to be worked out. So you never really see the exact amount. But this is the biggest one that was published, a $1 million settlement. But I have no doubt that there were bigger settlements out there that we just weren't aware of. In particular, FDNY has had a couple. FDNY is, I think we put like 6 different lawsuits in the database this year on overtime FLSA claims in FDNY. So that's just one fire department. There's many others that have.
But these are the ones that are preventable through good leadership, good training, good education of the leadership, right? I mean, those are preventable. So.
All right, and here we go.
Our
We're going to
favorite.
start right with, I think, the most you can't make this stuff up story, which was the San Jose Pink Poodle strip club case where, again, there's so many different aspects. We could talk about this in terms of social media, because this particular story broke when on social media, a scantily clad woman got out of a San Jose fire truck with high heels and some sort of it looked like a bikini, but it was not a bikini. It was whatever strippers wear, I guess. But she was walking into the strip club. Right out, got out of the engine and get in. So now the fire department, the firefighters came up with some sort of a crazy story that they had no choice, that she jumped on the truck. They didn't know what to do, so they drove her around the block, and then the video was taken. And so a lot of different aspects to it, but several articles, numerous news articles about it. I think the local media was having a field day with it. And then we also had a lawsuit brought by the local newspaper to try to get
the GPS data,
records released, and other things related to the whole thing.
But it was interesting because they were getting the records, the GPS records, and showing where the engine was and stopped. And I thought, it is public data.
They did have a couple of other stops too. Yeah, they did stop. Yeah. So,
but the length the newspaper went to get that story, and I was defending them when it came out. I like, hey, maybe she was walking down the street. She was far from the job. They picked her up because they didn't want her to get mugged wearing the little she was wearing, and they dropped her off at work. Yeah, well, that wasn't what it was.
I think their initial story was that they went there to drop off someone. They had to drop someone off at the strip club, which, what do you mean you had to drop somebody off the strip? That's your excuse? That's your defense? Okay, so, but then when they got there, they dropped the gentleman off at the strip club. She jumped on the truck, and they were like, oh no, now what do we do? We're going to get in trouble. All right, well, and she said, well, just take me around the block. So they took her around the block. At any rate, and I think part of the public records part of this also was they wanted to look into the disciplinary records of, was anyone disciplined over this, and so on. So,
and look, I think there's an important lesson for everyone to take away, right? It's Christmas time, so you drive Santa, you don't drive strippers. Simple lesson.
Simple, yeah. So the next one here, and again, I'm kind of doing them in reverse order because I really think that San Jose was probably you can't make this stuff up.
And I've just lost you. I don't know whether you can hear me, but I cannot hear you at all. So now I'm back. Now I can hear you.
Yeah, I think you froze. You froze for a minute and then came back. So, but next one is an interesting one. We had an African American firefighter who was assigned to a unit. His officer, I don't know if it was captain or lieutenant, company officer said, get on the truck, let's go. They went over to a party, kind of like a neighborhood party. And according to the African-American firefighter, there was racist themes. It was
fried chicken and watermelon under a sign for Trump, something like that. It was according to the firefighter that he was subjected to this hostile environment that they never should have went to, and you know what? Maybe they shouldn't have been there. Okay, that no question. Okay, but at any rate, he characterized it as a Juneteenth spoof party. And so he first complained about it. His officer gets disciplined. Then he files the lawsuit, and he was in the media a couple of times. The next thing that happened is it appears that the person who sponsored the party was a dentist. And he says that his business has been harmed, that this was not a racist party. This was not a Juneteenth spoof, that this was a legitimate backyard party with just a few people. And the captain happened to stop by. But he's suing, and he's not suing the firefighter for defamation, which I think is interesting, but he is suing the firefighter's attorney. And who else was he's suing two different people. Yeah, and unfortunately, finding the truth in this is going to be like pulling teeth.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, that
Yeah.
good one. All
Bad
right.
humor at the end.
So yeah, a little humor here. So but yeah, so here's the story about it. But he's actually claiming that he is the victim. The dentist is claiming that he's the victim
Right.
of a hate crime hoax. And that his dental practice has been irreparably damaged, that he's been the victim of hate mail and threats, that his employees have quit. And he's finding it very difficult to stay in business, that they're trying to cancel him. So, but they're going after, let's see, they're going after an elected official and an attorney. And I believe that's the attorney that filed the original lawsuit.
Yeah,
So,
I think the stint in this, again, not to get too deep in these weeds again, but I think that the bent on this one is they're saying, listen, this whole thing was a setup from the beginning. And it was only intended to make this guy look bad. So they used the firefighter, they used the fire engine, and it was all a setup by this attorney and elected official to go after this, well-connected individual. So who knows what the truth is, but from the beginning, it obviously should have happened. And I'm a little surprised. I will say, listen, I don't know the captain at all here, but I'm a little surprised that however you got there, whether you're tricked into being there or whatever, you see something like this going on and you don't recognize for your fellow firefighters that this is offensive. Then if true, shame on you, right? You got to, once again, look out for, and let me say this. If the theme of all of our talks were just look out for your fellow firefighters, a third of these would be gone, right? A third of these cases, settlements, suits would be gone. Look out for your firefighters, whether it's mentally or physically or whatever. Look out for your firefighters. They should have left. They should have just got there, saw what's going on. We're out.
all right, number three. This one, I'm still kind of intrigued by this one, but it was a lawsuit out in New Jersey where, as best I can tell from what I saw, we've got an engine on the apparatus ramp. Probably they're checking the pump or putting the pump through its paces, and the truck drives off. It must have been
Not
in
unheard
gear,
of.
crashes into the building across the street, and someone is injured in the process. So they've sued the fire department. The case initially was dismissed on appeal. The case was reinstated, so they're going to move forward now with that case. So driverless fire truck case. Okay. Next one here is a really difficult one, and that Rochester one is difficult. It doesn't seem like there's any room in the middle there for what happened. This Alabama one is difficult as well. We have an African American firefighter who was terminated ostensibly, or at least she says she was terminated because of tattoo and grooming violations. The department is alleging that she was terminated for other reasons. In addition, we've got two captains, both African American. The female firefighter in the Mobile case was African American as well. But the two captains one was terminated, one was disciplined, and they're claiming that they were disciplined for standing up for her rights. It's a couple of different suits now that are involved in this, at least two different suits and some discipline. So difficult case. And who knows? I mean, one of the problems I think sometimes is this stuff gets spun out of control in social media to the point where you don't really know what's going on. But at least as far as the factual allegations, folks can go to the original stories and at least look at the lawsuits, look at the complaints, see what the factual allegations are. Same thing with Rochester. That's what I encourage people to do, is rather than try to speculate as to who's right, who's wrong, at least understand the allegations, and you can see those. But this is, again, this doesn't look like there's middle ground here in the Mobile case. It's one way, there's clear racism and discrimination, or, we've got people with an agenda looking to try to make a point about something, and who knows? I mean, we don't know. But I certainly think that both of those, get Rochester and Mobile, leave me scratching my head on it. Okay. This one, I know you got a chuckle out of this one, but this was the fire chief who used his lights and sirens to pull over some kids, I guess. And at some point, a gun came out, and at least according to the parents of the children, he threatened the kids with a gun. So, I mean, if
We had
it's
another one just like this more recently, right? Where the guy pulls someone over, the fire chief pulls someone over and, ends up pulling a gun, hearing
yeah,
he's
this was the
wanted. I
case.
mean,
This is the case. Yeah,
oh,
this is
is that one?
yeah, yeah,
This is,
yeah.
these are, but these aren't rare. You and I and, Chip and John talked about this type of thing, I don't know, a decade ago, probably.
Yeah.
It's not rare. And wasn't it last year we saw a fire police officer pulled a gun? There's a picture of him pulling a gun
Oh
on a
yeah.
lady. I mean,
Yeah.
this is not rare.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, and it's not. And next one, last two are just really runners up, but I actually had people comment on this one, like, what, I don't understand where's who got bit by the dog, but man bites dog. It's like a way of saying that this is an unusual case. It's usually dog bites man. Man bites dog, but a Nevada case in medics were sued for not administering ketamine. All those cases we saw saying that you shouldn't have done ketamine, you did too much ketamine, you killed somebody, and all this stuff with ketamine. Here's a lawsuit saying that this person was having that excited delirium. Rather than allowing the person to thrash around on the ground and get hurt and have other bad things happen to him, the medic should have just administered ketamine. So, just you can't make this stuff up.
No, and I'm going to go
And
back to the same thing I said last week as a just a wrap up point for so many of these ketamine and Narcan cases and treating and helping the police, whatever. Just follow your darn protocols, right? If it says you can, do. If it doesn't say you can, don't. It's such an easy rule. Don't make it up. It's not your decision. And if the police or whoever are begging you to do something you're not allowed to do, call medical control if you really think you need to do it, but don't do it.
And then the last runner-up here, it was a suit by an Alabama fire department that was upset. They were getting ready for their Christmas festivities, I guess, for December of 2022, and they sent their Santa costume to the cleaners, and it somehow got damaged, and so they were upset. And the cleaner didn't own up to having damaged the suit or whatever, and so there's a civil suit by a fire department against the cleaner over damage to a Santa suit. So you can't make this stuff up.
Well, I think that is a good end to a 23, a great start to a 24. I would love to say to all our viewers, well, don't be one of these stories. If you have no other goal, be a good person and don't be one of these stories. And sometimes you can't help it. I've been, part of enough stories. Anyone who served as fire chief is going to be brought into, some crazy lawsuit. And so I think, the best you could hope for is don't do anything intentional that you could have avoided, that could keep yourself out of these things. Be good to everybody. Look out for everybody. Please don't put cameras in bathrooms. Drive safely, and just be a good person, and Happy New Year to everybody.
All right. Well, that is going to wrap up our work for 2023, and starting tomorrow, we're going to get working on 2024. So, Brad, we'll see you again next week, and we'll get back to our normal routine. And for everyone, we wish you the best for a happy new year in 2024. And from those of us at Fire Law Group, we'll see you next time.